The Utah Utes are going to win the Big 12 in football in 2024. At least that's what they want you to think. But I believe there are other contenders and some pretenders in this conference. This is Locked On Big 12 and a Locked On Utes crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Utes crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. And that's JT Wisher. A lot of content going on in that one. Thanks for making these shows your first listen every single day. JT, Utah is the odds-on favorite to win the Big 12. If you ask Joel Klatt, he would tell you that Utah is the number 6 team in the country and a first-round bye in the college football playoff this year. They are a contender in the Big 12. Let's talk pretenders, contenders, and almost a quasi-power ranking of teams in this league. If you are Utah, if you have been labeled the top dog by every major media outlet in the country, who are you scared of in this conference?
I think there's a couple teams that jump out right away. If you're looking at the Oklahoma States of the world with all the talent that they return, like if I'm doing my power rankings, I have them at number 2 right now. I think Kansas State.
Wait, who do you have at number 1? Tell about it. Who do you have at number 1?
You know, I know everyone's going to be shocked by this, but I do have to agree with Joel Klatt. I mean, Joel Klatt's a pretty smart guy, right? I can feel like if I'm agreeing with Joel Klatt, then I'm pretty smart. So I, of course, have the University of Utah number 1. I think there's a lot of logical reasons to say that. Just like I feel like there's a case you can make for a few of these teams to be number 1. So Oklahoma State right behind it, number 2. I'll go Kansas State at 3. I like Johnson, and I'm a big Chris Klieman fan. I think he's done a great job there for a few years now. At first, I was a little worried about them losing Will Howard just as someone who's coming into the conference, but the more you kind of dive in, you're like, oh no, they're gonna be fine. So that was good. Kansas, I think everything that they have gone on down there, what Lance has been able to do, just turning that program around, has been impressive. And I know Daniel's health, fingers crossed there, but I can't be like, oh, they're going to struggle because of his health concerns. Be like, Cam Rising is going to be great this year coming off his injury. So I feel good about Kansas. And I know a lot of people are down on Arizona because of some of the talent they've lost, but I just remember watching Noah Fafita a few times, and I do think he's pretty special. And if you have a good quarterback, as most of these teams we just mentioned do, I think that's the biggest difference. So those are the main 5 that I consider to be contenders. We can talk about some of the other teams in a second, but those are the group that I look at, and I'm like, if they won the conference over Utah, that wouldn't shock me.
It's way too early to have a lot of these conversations because we don't know how the transfer portal is going to shake out in this second round. There are still guys committing across the country on the gridiron and on the court as this wild, and we'll get to that up for Utah's sake later on in the show. But there are additions that could come into an Arizona State, to a Baylor, to even a TCU, who people are overlooking, that could make those teams quasi-contenders in this league. But right now, I circle a Kansas, and Oklahoma State obviously is 2 that I have vying for Arlington at the end of the year. But with Utah, maybe the main thing that I like about the Utes is this damn schedule. I don't know who you sold your soul to, but your non-conference game against Baylor that's not a conference game, and this slate is just compared to some of the other teams in the league. Obviously, the Oklahoma State game being early on is not easy, but gosh dang it, man. There's a lot to like if you're a Utah fan.
Missing Kansas and Kansas State is big for Utah. And I think they could there's a reason I have Utah above them, right? Like they could very well beat them. But especially if Utah had to go to those places, that's a tough game. Especially because I'm high on Utah. They haven't always fared great on the road in the Cam Rising era. They've won some good games on the road, but they've also lost against some good teams on the road too. So Utah definitely broke well for them, the schedule-wise. And I mean, you mentioned it. Like most teams would be like, oh, you're playing Baylor as a non-conference game. Like that's another Power 4 team. Like that's a tough game. But this is one of the years, this year and kind of last year, as Utah got up to, is a year you're okay seeing Baylor again. And, those were my main contenders. But, we got in the title right there, pretenders too. So I will say before I move on to full pretenders, I know that it's popular to crap on Colorado right now. And trust me, I do not like a lot of the stuff that's going on there. But like I mentioned with quarterbacks earlier, I was really impressed with a lot of things I saw from Shedeur. I know we got to wait and see it. I just can't imagine that offensive line is going to be worse than they are last year. So I think they're a team that can still make things interesting. I don't think they're with the other 5. But if you're telling me they upset one of those teams to make things interesting, that wouldn't surprise me. And then real quick, UCF, Iowa State, and West Virginia are the other ones I look at just missing out. Some people may hear Texas Tech is not in there. I'm just not a believer yet. I think even coming in last year, I'd heard a lot of the hype around them, and then you go out and it was a really disappointing even the start to the season from there. So Texas Tech fans, you guys can come at me, prove me wrong right away. I would love to see it this fall, but them and along with most of the other teams in the in the Big 12 don't scare me, especially not the team down in Provo, just to make a few more BYU fans mad at me, because why not?
I do think that Utah will beat BYU this season. I'll go on the record and say that based on the roster makeup, Utah is much better. And on paper, Utah is better than probably every other team in the Big 12 from a roster standpoint. JT, when we talk about pretenders, I do want to talk about the tendency for Kyle Whittingham. He's gotten in this great groove of losing 3 or 4 games in a season, even really successful seasons, right?
That's a good point.
Win a Pac-12 championship and still drop 2 or 3 games. So what's to say in the Big 12 he won't lose to maybe not a Colorado, but for sure that game on the road against UCF or even a Houston team or Arizona State who are overhauling. What is your confidence level in a league of parity that he can go without losing the 3 games that he likes to lose?
It is. Well, we already talked about the schedule, right? It's not as strong this year as it's been in years past. You can push back on some of the things I'm going to say too in a second, but I look at some of the road games they lost in the past, right? They lost to Bo Nix at Oregon. They lost to Dante Moore at DTR at UCLA, like a really good quarterback there too, right? You look back, we lost at Washington last year, Michael Penix and what he provides too, and obviously some of those happened with a Cam Rising injury, right? This is a Utah football team. I will say right away, like before I'm only talking about the road games right now. They don't lose at home unless it's to Bo Nix in Oregon, and even that was like that's the first time they lost at home since 2018. So that's why I feel confident that Utah's going to take care of business at home. You look at on the roads, like when they lost to BYU on the road 2 years ago, and even the San Diego State game, that was before Cam Rising emerged. And if you watch this team, you could just tell there was a total different shift once Cam Rising took over. Now they still lost to Oregon State. Oregon State's a really good team, right? That same thing. That's why Oklahoma State. I look at that one right there and go like that could very well be a loss. The game, some of these other games that Utah has on their schedule that are also going to be daunting tasks. So there's plenty of potential losses I see on there, but I don't feel like Utah's road schedule is as brutal, especially compared to some of the quarterbacks they've had to play in the past. Hence why I think I don't see a 3 or 4 loss season. I see a 1 or 2 loss season, and I'll emphasize the 1 at least as we sit here right now on May 7th.
JT, pretenders. Who do you just not think is ever going to be an issue at all?
Not an issue at all. Well, I'll say Houston. I'm just right now. When you say not at all, I'm talking about this year. I believe programs can climb up. I'll even say this about BYU. Like I think there's a chance that they can be a really good football team in a few years. Just like I saw Utah make the climb up. Right, you got to get the right recruiting classes in there. Maybe Kalani Sitake's the right guy to do that. There was a lot of positive momentum, and then there's been negative momentum. So I still think that is to be determined. I'm not ready to say he is their Kyle Whittingham, right? The guy who rose them to prominence. So that's one that jumps out to me right away. Outside of that, you look at some of the other teams across the conference. I know I was mentioned to West Virginia. I think that I think they are right on the cusp of being for real. But sometimes, you shock a team and then you think you're going to be good and then it doesn't work out from there too. So yeah, BYU, Cincinnati is another one I point to there. So, I mean, I do only think there are so many teams that can really win this conference. I know every team will get fired up and talk themselves into why they can do it, Baylor being another one. And I said, my biggest pretender personally, I'm going to have to roll with TCU for that too. So, yeah, I mentioned the group of the teams I feel the strongest about. There are a few pretenders in this conference because only so many teams can win it, right? Maryland this year is probably going to be a decent Big Ten team. There's no way they're winning the Big Ten with all the loaded teams and conferences in there like that. Just because you're not a conference contender doesn't mean you can't be a decent team. So I really only think I have 5 teams that can really win it. I'll go 4 other teams that can make things interesting. And everyone else, I don't see a path for them right now to win the Big 12 this fall.
Coming up next, does Utah actually want to be in the Big 12? This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Look, Yahoo Finance is where I go. I'm 23 years old. Like, what do I, they didn't teach me in school how to balance a checkbook. They didn't teach me in school how to do the numbers thing. So now I have an investment account with Charles Schwab and a 401k with Fidelity. What does that mean? I don't even really know. But Yahoo Finance helps me consolidate it, keep it in one place, and help me understand the best that I can. So straight to the point, if you want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of your financial freedom, do it with Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking to have the extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you the tools that you need. Go to yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is yahoofinance.com. JT Wistersill, Locked On Utes. the rhetoric very early on with Utah joining the Big 12, and even because I'll say it, crazy Uncle Kyle Whittingham, he says some things sometimes that are crazy, but so does Mike Gundy, right? I think they fall in a similar category. But what a lot of people got, the flavor they got, is that Utah doesn't want to be in the Big 12. They're not happy about being in this conference. I want to ask you a question that's twofold, two-pronged here. Why? Number one, why did people get that sense? And number two, is it true?
I think people get the sense because a lot of fans online were like, oh, we've won back-to-back Pac-12 championships, or, oh, we're at the forefront of college football in terms of just those recent conference championships. I guess that's why. I just think there were a lot of people there who were unrealistic about what Utah was. And I'm someone who's high on Utah. I do think they're one of the better brands currently in college football from what they do on the field. They're not a brand as like a Miami or things of that nature. Utah was never going to get into the Big Ten or the SEC this go around. And especially the Big Ten, I think, is the one. It's like, well, the best Pac-12 teams are going over there. So it feels like since we're not with them, we had to go somewhere else. Like, I want to be there. So I think some of the fans were disappointed in that aspect, I guess. And in a sense, I can get that in some ways, right? Just because obviously you're talking about which two conferences are in the strongest position to be at the continued forefront of college football. It is the Big Ten, the SEC at the moment. But
I hate to interject too, but again, I get that there's a Pac-12 allegiance. There's part of that Pac-12 is the conference that took the chance on Utah to make them a power conference school, right? So that going away is not good. They want to go to the Big Ten, and there were murmurs of Utah to the Big Ten. When that doesn't happen, I can see the distaste. And I do still think there are some Utah fans that feel that way going into the Big 12. Yeah. I guarantee you, with the way that all of us media members are lauding the football program as the cream of the crop before they even step on the gridiron here, that doesn't help. That also inflates the head. Do you still think that mentality is there for a lot of fans then?
I think it is. I think a lot of fans feel that way as well. But I still think the majority of fans, at least from what I can gather, realize that, hey, this worked out really well for Utah to still be in a Power 4 conference. Like, if Utah doesn't have their recent success, who's to say Utah's not Oregon State and Washington State right now, independent and sitting out and, having to have most of their games on the CW. No offense to the CW. I just say that's the reality of what the situation is coming up about to be for those schools. So, yeah, I think Utah should consider themselves lucky to be in the Big 12 because it's an opportunity for them to continue to elevate their brand. A lot of the brands in the Big 12 right now aren't as strong as maybe they've always been. We mentioned a school like a Baylor, right? Arizona State is a Pac-12 school coming over. They would qualify under the Contenders, right? They're not where they want to be yet. Houston's not up to par yet. Obviously, Kansas is doing things they've never done, but in place of that, you have some of these other schools that aren't doing where they would want to be necessarily at this moment. But I think all of those brands have the opportunity to get up and get stronger. Just like how the Pac-12 just wrapped up a season in which it was one of the strongest conferences in college football, I think the Big 12 has a chance to be that very soon too. When you look at the opportunity that presents itself with all these new and incoming talents, Brett Yormark's doing a good job of pushing the boundaries of the future of the sport in general. So I feel like this is a really strong and growing conference too. And I'll say this, I think Utah, number one, you get through a Power 4 schedule, and if you're one of the better programs in that conference, like I expect Utah to be, you're putting yourself in strong college football playoff condition. And that's what this is all about, right? Success in the postseason to continue to try to just be the best, because that's what we love about college football, right? Everyone hypothetically has a chance to win it all. Now, obviously, even Utah is going to be really hard-pressed to win a national championship anytime soon, but the fact that they have a chance to make playoff runs in the new format, that's exciting. And that doesn't happen unless you're in the Big 12. And I'll also say this really quick about basketball. I think Utah basketball, even though it might not be great this coming year, I think eventually being in
everybody run and hide
will force them to elevate.
We're talking about Utah basketball. Hide your children.
Yeah.
Don't tell them about it.
But no, I feel like the football program will continue to get elevated, and the basketball program, even though they're going to get the crap beat out of them.
No,
maybe
stop it. We don't have to talk about basketball yet. You can leave that one off. Utah basketball can sit on the back burner. We were having a good, happy, fun time talking about football here. JT, before we get to the portal and basketball and what's left of the Utah program, this idea that Utah could have gone to the Big Ten was one that I subscribed to. I thought originally that would be the case. I thought Utah would be a Big Ten team. Had that happened, I don't think Utah has any shot at the college football playoff. I think it gets a lot tougher in that realm, especially if you get, hey, now we play Oregon, Washington, Penn State, Michigan. If that's your gauntlet, things get real tough real fast. Does it feel like in the end, Utah got put in the right spot to not only compete, but also be in a place of comfort?
I think you're right. I think they did. I think that's a great point you make, because if those teams are on your schedule, Utah has gotten up to another level, but they're not at the level yet where I'm like, oh yeah, I already mentioned the big road games they've lost to. That's why we think they can have success in the Big 12, is they'll avoid a lot of those teams. Utah is really good. It takes a special team to be able to go into Ohio State and win. And even that, that's almost an unrealistic one, right? But even winning when Ohio State comes to you, beating Oregon year in and year out, right? Oregon's beaten Utah the last 2 years. Utah can beat Oregon. They beat them in the Pac-12 championship not too long ago, but beating them year in and year out, right? Washington, UCLA is about to go through it with everything that's happened there. There's someone where I could see that program kind of like how Nebraska, when they entered the Big Ten, right? Like they're just nowhere what they used to be. And UCLA hasn't been what it's been for a long time now. But I think that is a great point you make, Drake. And Utah is set up for success in the Big 12, even post-Cam Rising, right? Like maybe they'll fall off a year, but they could come right back. And who knows, maybe they're a team that year in and year out can be a contender in the Big 12. I think the potential is there depending on how they navigate the transfer portal. But in the Big 10, it would literally just be like, man, we're a really good team. And maybe that's where I go back to talking about Maryland, right? Because you ain't beating the top dogs. You're not going to beat the Michigans and some of those other schools, the USC and all of those things. So that's where I think it could get messy for Utah. And if they want to succeed right now, which obviously they do, the best place for them to be this fall is the Big 12.
Utah basketball is on fire, and the football team also lost a couple transfers. What's going on there in Salt Lake City? This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Utes crossover. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, FanDuel is where I go to say Mystic Dan is going to win the Kentucky Derby. And guess what? He does it. And when he does it, my $20 turns into $300. Why did I bet on Mystic Dan? Because he's got a really cool name. So I said, Mystic Dan? His odds are kind of bad, so if he wins, I win a lot of money. And he did. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL as well, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com/lockedon today for a chance at that $150 in free play at FanDuel.com. JT Witzer still of Locked On Utes. From the outside perspective, it seems like Utah basketball is on fire. The football team also lost a couple of head-scratching transfers. Let's start on the gridiron. That's the most important. Yes. Coming up with Utah and the transfer portal. Do you feel as though those who exited were a version of positive attrition? As that number got close to kind of 10, you lost a couple guys in conference to Arizona, and there was the A&M kid. I mean, why are these guys jumping ship? And is it a bad thing, or are those dudes that you really aren't going to miss?
You're not going to miss them because they want to play, and that's completely understandable. There is one that Utah might potentially miss. Coley, the team's starting center from last year, entered the portal, now at Texas A&M. This is not inside information. I have a hard time believing that Utah just didn't get outbid in that situation, but I'll also say this about Coley. Johnny Maea, who was going to be Utah's starting center last fall, got hurt, and then that was what allowed Coley to start. I believe.
Wait a second. A Utah starter got hurt last year?
Yeah, exactly. I believe if Coley had stayed, Maea beat him out before. I think he would have beat him out again. So I actually think it worked out well for Coley too. But let's say Maea doesn't get back to full health. That's the one position that could potentially hurt Utah. It's nice you have Jaron Kump, a guy who started games for you, even though his starts at center didn't go great. But if that's your backup, still a guy who started games, I feel decent about the center position. Literally everywhere else, it's like Chase Kennedy left and so did Vaughn after coming over from UTEP. Those are two defensive ends, right? The defensive line is absolutely loaded for Utah with tons of returning contributors. And you just added a transfer in Paul Fitzgerald anyways. Damon Alford's coming over, wide receiver if you lost Sidney and Bannister. And Bannister was never really going to play much this fall anyways. Alford's a guy over 600 yards, average 19 yards per catch, coming over from Syracuse. I think he's a legit guy too. Even just added a backup quarterback. I felt good about where Utah's quarterback stood, but now they added Sam Heward, who, no, it's not Brock Heward's son, it's Brock Heward's brother, brother's son, who Brock Huard's brother, Damon, also played in the NFL too. So either way, some good backup pedigree there if Wilson and Rose don't pan out. I feel really good about where Utah's at. I think they did a great job at the transfer portal early in the spring and then post-spring ball. Everyone that's left wants playing time. Coley is the only one you can make an argument for upgraded, but if we're talking about on-the-field success over the last few years, there's no way you can tell me Texas A&M has been better than Utah as of recently.
Nope. If you want to win, you stay at Utah rather than going to Texas A&M. But if you want to get paid and play, A&M's not a bad spot to go if you're the guy who would likely lose his starting job. Let's go into, I'll say dumpster fire, man.
I thought are we out of time? Are we out of time? I think there's
Utah basketball used to exist. Here's what I love about Caleb Lohner going to Utah is I didn't have to watch him kick the ball off of his shin and into the stands anymore on the basketball floor for the Baylor Bears. Now I get to watch him. I can only imagine he's going to fumble the ball like 7 times for Utah. I don't even know if he's going to play that much in football.
He's going to play. The tight end room's fantastic.
Right. He doesn't play football. I don't know what he's doing. Instead, I love the graphic you posted that was like, you know what? I might explore the opportunity of playing basketball as well. If I am anyone in the Salt Lake City area, I am burning. I'm just like, please play basketball. I've been saying that to anyone, much less Caleb Lohner. What is going on? I know that a couple of transfers have come in. This conversation would have been much more dour maybe 4 days ago. What is going on with Utah basketball? And does it still exist, or have they folded the program?
It still exists. As right now we're recording this, it should be a rough first year for them in the Big 12, which really sucks for Craig Smith. I think Craig Smith is a good basketball coach.
That's good.
But clearly, I'll say this. Obviously, the recruiting hasn't always been there. Now, the Davon Smith thing worked out. I can go through a ton of misses as well, too. And as much as I like Coach Smith, Utah's really struggled on the road in big games. Now, I still think they just missed out on the NCAA tournament. They were one of the last 12 teams in whatever you want to slate, like to miss out one of the last 12 teams. Right. So I think all the talk, they have to fire him now. I think that is ridiculous. I think he deserves a chance. But it's hard for me to believe when you just lost Brandon Carlson, Davon Smith, who led the Pac-12 in triple-doubles, set a record as well for Pac-12 era in triple-doubles. And you even lose a guy like Keba Keita in the 11th hour. And you see an assistant coach leave who you brought over from BYU, been here for the past few years, and now he's jumping ship back to BYU. It's not good. They've added a couple of guys. None of them are going to move the needle. Some of you Big 12 fans will be familiar with Mason Madsen, is Gabe Madsen's twin brother, but he only averaged 8 a game. It's not like he's coming in and going to take over the world in Salt Lake. Even Miro Little, right? He's a former Baylor guard. He only averaged 1 point a game. Now, I will say, former 4-star potential is there. Yeah. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on him and a lot of these other, even Keller from Wake Forest, right? He averaged 1 point a game too. Dawes is coming over from Rice. There's not a lot of these guys that really move the needle and make you think, oh yeah, where I mentioned for Utah football, maybe it'll be a weaker conference this year that when the Pac-12 was last fall, the Big 12 is going to be a way better basketball conference than Utah is. So there's potential here for the team to maybe be a little better, but they've had a lot of recruiting misses, and I don't know if it's NIL or what it is, but clearly Utah needs to do a better job recruiting and finding players. And if they don't pick up some more players in the portal, and barring a crazy season, we're probably talking about a Utah coaching change this time next year. That's just the facts.
Yeah, I mean, you can't... It's tough because you walk into the Big 12, which is such a good conference. This vaguely reminds me of what happened to West Virginia going into this first year, this last season of basketball, where there was a coaching change there, and just that dumpster fire is the right word to describe what those fans went through and those players went through. And you felt like, outside of perspective, you felt bad because you just knew, like the buzzsaw is coming. And I don't know if they deserve it.
But you like really quick, you like the talent that West Virginia added. Kirk Kriisa. I'm not a big Kirk Kriisa fan. That at least would get you excited at the time. Raekwon Battle did big things in the Big Sky. These guys, I'm trying to talk myself into a guy who didn't even average 2 points a game last year. That it's such a drastic. Even that is a drastic difference.
I'll expose you here, and then we'll close the show.
Okay.
You did send me a text, which was the highlights of one of the new transfers that Utah got, and said the first highlight on here is an air ball. Is that good? No, that's not good. JT, for listeners of Locked On Big 12 who are Utah fans and want to find more of your content, or just general JT Wistrcill fans, where can they find you?
Well, you guys can follow me at X if there are like one or two somehow genuine JT Wistrcill fans out there. I salute all of you, so you can follow me on X. And for Locked On Utes and Utah content, make sure you guys just check it out at Locked On Utes on YouTube, as well as on X, where it's always fun breaking everything down with Utah. Often time with Drake as well, too, who once again said more positive things about Utah as well. So, Drake, we're eventually getting that narrative changed, my friend.
Coming around, I do think Utah fans on the whole want to be in the Big 12. I'll put that out there, though. There are those few that I'm like, shut up. Just stop it. Just be nice for 1 second. This has been It Always Will Be. That's JT Wistrcill. That's I'm Sunbird. Come back to these shows for more of what you want every day with the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, this has been It Always Will Be. Locked On Utes. And thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.